So, hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of Coolcast, where I interview super cool people doing super cool things. And today I'm super excited to have with me Arthur Levitan, who is a Daoist priest and a Tai Chi master teacher. And Arthur has had a very interesting journey, and he's written his first book, Outlast, which I've read a couple of times, and I totally recommend it for anybody who's having a bad life, a bad year. It's just a practical guide on how to live your life on life's terms. So welcome, Arthur. I'll
Thank
bring
you.
you in. Hi.
Wonderful to be here. Appreciate
Nice
it.
to see you. I am really, really glad. I've been really looking forward to interviewing you. And I have a bunch of questions to ask you about your book and about your life.
Sure.
So just so that my audience knows who you are a little bit, could you just let us know, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I was born in Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine in 1972. So it was still very much a Soviet Union. It was a interesting place to live, not a fun place, I would say, and I don't have any great memories from growing up there. At 9 years old, my parents were given permission to leave, and we came to America, but not before I told my second grade. I finished 2 grades in Russia. My second grade teacher that we were leaving, and she said that basically I'm going to my death, that people who move to America live behind steel doors, and that people break in all the time and they're terrorized. And that caused me to have a nice crying fit with my parents of, where are you taking me and why? But as it turns out, America was a very, very great place. I'll give you a quick story about why I
Yeah,
thought it
please
was a
do.
great place. So when I was around 6, 7 years old, I had this issues with my ears, where either mucus or phlegm or something, or a virus, whatever it was, started accumulating inside the ears. So in the Russian medical system, the solution was to have several people hold me down while somebody else pokes and punctures my ear with a very sharp stick, and then relieves the pressure, right? And as you can imagine, that's not a fun procedure to go through when you're young. So when I came to America, I had the same problem with my ears. I got an ear infection and everything, and I was terrified. I'm like, this is going to happen again. And we went to the children's hospital, and they said, oh, okay, so here. And they gave me this pink bottle of liquid to drink. I'm like, this is it? They're like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm like, took it home, drank it. The ear infection went away. Everything went away. Nobody punctured my ear with a steel ice pick or something like that. And I'm like, this is a great freaking country. So we landed in Boston, Massachusetts. And sure enough, of course, the first year we were living in Brighton, and our apartment did get broken into, but that was like the one time. And it's been many years since. And went to Brookline High, for those who know the area and everything. And then to WPI eventually. Along the
WPI?
way, Worcester Polytech
Okay.
Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Along the way, started a bunch of businesses, did a bunch of things, wound up on the spiritual journey, and here we are. I mean,
And the end, we're done.
great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
So I just want to refer to, one of the things that you say in your book.
Now we're going to get to find out if I was actually the one who wrote it.
Right. Well, one of the first things that you talk about is that you're like 19 years old. Like, you come to this country, you're 19 years old, and you have a business. You're running your business when you're 22
Yeah.
years old.
I started when I was basically almost 20, 19, sophomore in college. Yeah, I just did that. I just, heard there was a good business.
What kind of business did you
It
start?
was actually physical therapy.
Really?
Yeah, and it grew to 6 offices and 50 employees, and everything. And we did a great job. It was really a lot of fun, in a sense that it gave me a great opportunity to learn how to be obsessively customer focused. And whereas, because I never really worked for anybody, I mean, I did a 6-month internship at Merrill Lynch, and I hated that so much because every day I had to wear a tie and shave. And I was just like, there's no way I'm doing this on a daily basis in my life. Forget it. I mean, I'm, I'm going to go
I
tar roof.
understand. I understand. I decided at one point that if I, there were a few things that I had to have for a job, and one is that I had to be barefoot. So, because I hated wearing shoes.
There you go.
Yeah, we all have our thing. Yours is shaving in a tie.
But I just thought the tie was like the worst invention in the world. And even though they wanted me to continue, they were going to sponsor me for Series 7, whatever that stockbroker thing is. I'm just like, I was like, there's no way. So one thing led to another. I started my first business, borrowed 20 grand from friends and family and started that. But because I never worked for anybody else, it all came from inside of me of, well, how should I do this? I don't know. How would I like to be? If I walked into the room, how would I like it to be? And instead of looking at everybody else, I started looking at how I would like to be treated. And I started creating forms, procedures, and everything else the way I would like to see them. And one of the things I realized pretty early on is that while the patient is the patient and you should be very focused on the patient, the real client is actually the referral sources. People who are sending you these patients and everything, whether they're doctors or lawyers or other physical therapists or whatever it was. And I started focusing on those and trying to find out exactly what they needed in return, as far as what kind of product, as far as notes or reports, and being in a timely manner and everything. And I focused a lot on that. And that actually brought me more business than anything else, because they started sending more business because it was easy to work with me.
So you were sort of going to the fountainhead to get, is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that was your very first business when you were 22 years old.
That was.
And had you gone into business school, or this was just intuitive? You just had it in you. That's amazing.
Well, I suppose I had it in me, but also since I was 15, I was working at my dad's construction company. And by the time I was 17, he ran into some financial trouble where he couldn't afford his supervisor or foreman anymore. So basically I became it, supervising 20 guys. You know, I would drive into high school on a beat up pickup truck, construction truck. And at 2:00 I would drive out right to the job site. And a lot of times I would sort of skip school too. So I learned a lot about interacting with customers. I learned a lot about interacting with employees. And I also learned something else. I learned kind of what kind of person I wanted to be when in that position, when you're in a position of being a business owner or a supervisor or manager, how I wanted to interact with people and how I wanted them to think of me. So that was a great experience in that sense, because I always looked around and I saw how other people did it, and I realized I didn't like it the way they did it. They felt like they had to be, for the lack of a better word, assholes in order to get other people to do what they wanted. And that wasn't in me. I couldn't be an asshole for too long. Don't get me wrong. I could be, but not for too long. But not long enough to produce the results necessary.
Right.
So when I embraced myself for who I was, which was more on the softer side, things went really, really well because I was being myself instead of trying to be someone else.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you meet your wife? And tell us about
my wife. I met my wife through a friend of mine who she was dating at the time. So she was dating a friend of mine, and I became
note to self.
I was a very idealistic young man growing up. And in that sense, I had developed a very strict set of rules for myself of behavior that I felt that a person should be. And one of them was exactly do not covet your neighbor's wife. So my friends' girlfriends were off limits. No matter if I would have liked them or not liked them, I actually I wouldn't allow myself to even feel an attraction to them. So what happened as a result is I just became friends with her. And we hung out together, and then one thing led to another after they parted ways, and we found ourselves in that situation. So, and things changed, perspectives changed.
Well, you mention her quite a bit in your book in
Yes.
terms of, and I want to get to your book now, in terms of um, this book is about a business that did fail and what you had to do
It
to
didn't fail. It just succeeded in a different way.
succeed in a different way. I like that much better. But you had to outlast, excuse me,
Oh,
outlast the difficulties.
yes.
So first of all, you talk about how Taoism helped you.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people aren't going to know what even Taoism is or what the Tao is. So let's just begin right there. Explain to us, what is the Tao? What is Taoism?
So Taoism was a philosophy developed in China 2,500 years ago, and it was developed exclusively by looking at nature. So essentially by observation and replication of nature. So what does that mean? They sat on rocks for a long time, watched the seasons change, watched the trees grow. They watched the animals interact with each other. They watched how that worked out. They watched how the elements were, the water flowing and everything. And from all those observations, they created a book called the Tao Te Ching, Book of Virtue, or, and it's 81 poems. And what it does is it helps you do three things very, very clearly. So, three things, the most important thing in Taoism: seeing yourself clearly, which is the journey inward. In other words, it all begins with you. Every step, every journey, your position 0 on the graph. Okay? So everything starts with you, not somewhere else externally, but internally. All paths start from you. Number 2, seeing the world clearly. In other words, seeing reality for truly what it is without being distorted by the filters of your upbringing. So we all grow up in different cultures, different societies with different rules. All those rules are man-made artificial rules. They have nothing to do with the natural world. They have everything to do with the artificial societies that man create. Obviously, men, I mean humanity, not just, create in order to function as a whole towards some end, right? And we've been, as a species, insanely successful in doing so. But no civilization has ever lasted. They've all fallen, and the reason for that is because it's an artificial structure masquerading as a natural one. Okay? So that's number 2, seeing the world clearly as it is, not through the filters of the artificial structure. And number 3, finally, is seeing yourself in that world. Your puzzle piece, where does it fit? And if you do those 3 things, your life will be absolutely amazing for one reason only, because you'll be living your life as opposed to someone else's. And everything else, all the lessons, all the principles, all stem from that point of origin, and they all radiate outward.
Wow, that is a very interesting. Those are very interesting ways of viewing Taoism. I think it's very simple and very concise and clear. I really love it. You have also in your book, you talk about the windshield wiper. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's actually a story my teacher told me when I first met him. And after he showed me around the temple, which terrified me a little bit. So
I've been in that temple. I can see what you're talking about.
Right? So him and his very beautiful and very energetically powerful wife, they sat down with me and they had a conversation. And the conversation ended with that story where he said to me, he said that imagine your life as a sports car driving down the highway very, very fast. And the faster you drive, the more bugs and grime affect your windshield, and the more your vision becomes more and more cloudy, so not clear. You can't see the road ahead of you. And he said, sooner or later, you'll either miss your turn in the best case scenario, or worst case scenario, you'll wind up dead because you ran into a tree, right? So what Taoism does is it constantly provides the windshield wipers necessary to keep your windshield clear, which is exactly the same thing that we just talked about, seeing things clearly for what they truly are, not for what you want them to be. So essentially, that's what Taoism does. It doesn't solve your problems for you. It doesn't tell you where to go, but it allows you to see the road ahead of you clearly enough for you to make the right decisions for yourself.
So let me ask you, and I want to get into the chapters of your book, but let me just ask you, clarity isn't the easiest thing if you have emotions, if you are very close to a situation, if you have a story about who people are, we have, so what are just maybe a couple of ways in which a Taoist would try and find clarity? Like, first of all, even just like with themselves.
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. Absolutely. And another way of seeing the word or understanding the word clarity is it's also very close to being grounded in yourself, right? And how do you achieve being grounded? How do you become grounded with this world? Well, here's the deal. You can't think your way to it. You can't imagine your way to it. You have to physically work at it. There has to be a physical practice which connects you to the moment, and that moment to this physical existence. Okay? So there's three things that we do simultaneously with our three bodies. There's a physical practice, and for me personally, it was Qigong. And Qigong is essentially energy breath work. It's breathing in a certain way, and then connecting the dantian or the core to that breath, connecting the toes to that breath, and finally connecting motion to that breath. So that's the physical practice that worked for me. There are others, such as Tai Chi and such. Whatever is right for you that keeps you connected to this world. And what I recommend most of all is eyes should be open all the time. In the physical practice, eyes should be open because you want to be here, not within yourself. You want to be able to see things in this world rather than imagine them in your head. When you close your eyes, you're off somewhere else. You're not in the moment. You're somewhere else. So eyes should be open. Number two is the mental. And that's what we talked about. That is where philosophy comes into being, where philosophy provides a framework how to see the world, how to understand the world. It gives you structure. As I said, it doesn't give you all the answers, but it provides a structure for your journey. Because you need that. We, as human beings, we require that. Number three is the meditations. And the meditation should fall in line with the rest of the philosophy, not be a separate practice from it. So in Taoism, it's at least in my lineage, and there's different lineages, obviously. In my lineage, the meditations are really called visualization exercises, where we visualize different exercises that lead to different results, but they're all still based on the same core of Taoism. They're not as separate from the physical practice. They're not separate from the mental practice. It's all the same thing.
Are these meditations open-eyed meditations as well, or
No,
they're closed eyes then?
No, this is where we ask the physical to let us go, so we can work on the spiritual.
Oh, wow, that's very good. Yeah, interesting. So earlier I said that your business failed, and I you're right. I was absolutely wrong in saying that. Although some other people might say, might look at it in a different way, in the way that they might tell that story. But I really love what you say in your book. You say the goal of Outlast is to show you how to win, not by fighting, but by outlasting your adversaries. And you didn't really put these as rules for survival, but I've kind of looked at them as each of these chapters are some different rules that you have for survival. And what I noticed that everything had to do with two things, which I think are what you're in a little bit of what you're talking about. But I also wanted you to look at these two words. They seem to have to do with focus and energy, like where you put your focus and where you put your energy. And I know as a Taoist, you are working. I mean, that's what Qigong exercises is, right? You're looking at energy. So I want to just ask you a little bit, in looking at the focus and energy and the way that you can use your mind and use your body and use your spirit the way you talked about. The very first chapter, very interesting that you start with this, is you say, don't be alone. So I want to know what happens to your energy and focus if you try to do everything yourself.
We're not gods. We can't do everything, right? But that's not really the important part here, actually. The important part is to always go with your nature, not against it. Go with the flow of the river, go with the flow of the universe, not against it. Because if you go with it, then that flow will do all the work for you, and all you're doing is steering, using very little energy to get a big result. So in Taoism, the concept of minimal effort, maximum results, that's exactly what that is, right? Imagine sitting in a canoe on a river, and if you're going to use all your energy to paddle upstream, right, then you have no energy left for anything else.
Exactly.
Right? So what do I mean by not being alone? Our human nature was designed to be cooperative, to be interdependent, to depend on someone else to augment us or to help us in this life, right? Because if we were meant to do it alone, we'd reproduce by ourselves. We wouldn't need a partner, right? We'd be like, what is that, amoeba or something? They just split.
Yeah.
I can just imagine you and I sitting here. We're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's just split, right?
I just had a baby.
Right? Can you imagine another one of us running around? I mean, wow. So
just cloning ourselves back and forth. Yeah.
So when you try to do everything by yourself, not only are you wasting enormous amount of energy that you should be conserving for really difficult times, but also you're going against human nature. So you're going to suffer way more emotional difficulties, mental difficulties, spiritual difficulties, because you're going against your nature. So it's to assemble a team around you in the same way, regardless what it is, a business team, a crisis team, a spiritual team, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Is to go along with the human nature. And therefore you will get a massive boost from that.
I want to go back to that a little bit because I want to start asking questions about how you do some of these things, but I just want to get to the next one. You say, it's basically don't should yourselves, woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like it's a waste of energy, right? And so in what way is this wasting your energy?
When you live in the past, and that's all where you live, you give up the moment, you give up today. And all you're doing is daydreaming and thinking of, and most importantly, what you're doing is you're judging yourself. Regret, judgment, all those things drain your energy like there's no tomorrow, right? So instead of your energy being focused on the task in hand, surviving, getting through the day, right? You're this essentially taking a huge chunk of it, opening up the toilet of yesterday and flushing it down.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what it is. Now, the other side of it is those who live for the future give up the choices of today.
Right.
Right? So if your mind is only on the future, that's it. You've missed the moment, you've missed the opportunity, you've missed a chance to pivot, you've missed the chance to take a nap. Okay? Let's break it down to the simplest common things. You're in a battle. When you're in a crisis, when we live our lives, we're kind of in a state of battle in one way or another, right? But it's a low-grade battle. It's kind of a battle of attrition, a war of attrition. When we get into crisis, that all gets, elevated to insane proportions.
Right.
So every tiny smidgen of energy you can save or you can conserve or you can create, then it becomes very precious. So if you have a chance to take a nap for 20 minutes and you can't because your mind won't stop thinking of the past or the future, you've destroyed your chances of actually showing up at that next meeting, that next court date, that next conversation, and being alert and being adaptive and taking advantage of the opportunities presented to you.
So, you just mentioned court date, and I realized that I'm asking all these questions from your book, but I'm not telling people what happened to you. And so I'd like you to just briefly say what happened. I mean, you had a $200 million company. Is that right?
Yeah, it was $100 million. It was on its way to that, but yeah. So essentially, we grew way too fast. We hired a lot of people. We did a lot of things, and what happens is there were several factors. Number one, I was very, very inexperienced when it came to healthcare, so I did not understand the nuances of that. Number two, I got really, really bad counsel as legal counsel in the beginning of the business. So the foundations weren't exactly in the right place. And I didn't know that. And I had no way of knowing that. And also the laws of healthcare are written in a way that there's no real bookends around them. They're very flexible and very gray. So you can interpret them any way you want. And the government does that for a reason, because they then get to go after doctors, healthcare providers, big companies, and get big whatever, they get money from them, right? A lot of the AG's offices are geared towards that. They have whole divisions of what they think, they call it fraud, but really it's an extortion scheme to get money from the healthcare professionals. Don't get me wrong, there are some who are doing very bad things, but for the most part, everybody gets caught in that net, right? So it's indiscriminate. So that's what we wound up getting caught in. We wound up being accused of several things. One of them was actually something that I thought I was doing the right thing, but it turned out to be the wrong thing, which is we were servicing substance abuse facilities. And they could not afford to pay co-pays. They could not afford to pay any kind of fees. So for those who couldn't afford to, we just forgave that. And I was just like, you know what? We make enough from the insurance payments and everything. We don't need to make money off of people who can't afford to. So what? I'll make $2 more. I mean, that sounds stupid, right? So again, out of what I thought was the right thing to do, turned out that was against the law. So you cannot give out free services. And there are loopholes how you do that. So you first have to bill them 3 times. And when they don't pay you 3 times, that's when you can sort of forgive them and stuff. I didn't have that counsel. I didn't have the right counsel. So that was one of the things we did. Everything else happened as a result of growing too fast, hiring people who were doing things that I wasn't able to catch. But that's all irrelevant, because in the end of the day, everything that happened was my responsibility and my fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So I was given a choice by the government to either save myself or save 500 jobs. And the people who came up with me and the people who worked for me and with me, they were the most amazing people in the world. And I couldn't see myself running away and letting them, basically become unemployed, and letting this company, who was really a phenomenal company we built, because it was an amazing corporate culture, having it fall apart. So I took a deal, I made a deal with the government where I would take responsibility for whatever they wanted me to. I would pay them $20 million and they would leave us alone. It was as simple as that. It turned out all they wanted was money. In the end of the day, that was the most important thing for them.
Right. And then, but you did end up leaving the company eventually, right?
I had to. That was part of the deal.
That's part of it. Okay.
That was part of the deal.
But the company continued.
The company continued. The company was sold to a private equity company, which ran it into the ground in 2.5 years.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. The last time it made a profit was the last day I worked there.
Mm.
And when they came in, it was a fascinating conversation. When they sat down across the table from me and my team, they're like, all of you are hacks. We're all MBAs. We know what we're doing. You people just got lucky. You will see what a real company does. And they took a company that was making $100 million a year and they ran it into the ground with $100 million in debt.
Wow. Wow.
That was what real MBAs do, I guess.
Wow.
You can see I'm not hurt at all.
Not at all. No judgment.
No judgment whatsoever. I enjoyed when I get MBAs as students.
Well, so like when we talk about don't should yourself or don't, so these are all things that, as you talk about in your book, that these are all things that you're learning, that this is how you had to cope with this, this is how you had to outlast it.
Yes.
So the next one is accept and embrace, which I think is where I'm seeing you be at. So what happens to your energy when you're not accepting and you're not embracing reality?
So imagine yourself constantly pushing a wall. How long before your energy burns out if you're constantly pushing a wall that can't move? Right? So you're always like this and you're always pushing. And that's what happens when you don't embrace reality for what it is and you don't accept the situation for what it is. Every day you wake up and you're pushing that wall. You're pushing it away, you're pushing it away, you're pushing it away. Now here's the deal. The further you push the opponent away, the less information you have on that opponent. Right? If something is close, you can smell that person. You can see the tiny nuances, the tiny twitches in the eyes. You can see the feet move a little bit or shift a little bit. You can see all that. The further away he goes, the further, then you're not going to be able to get the little twitches in the eyes. You're not going to be able to get a sense of when that opponent is about to move, right? So you lose your early warning systems the more you push things away.
Now, you and I have talked about a word that you have is camouflage, which I want you to talk about a little bit, because I think that it goes along with what you're talking about here. And instead of keeping your enemies further away, you bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about what this idea about camouflage is.
So that's one of the principles of Taoism. The 81 poems break down into 9 principles, essentially, which creates the structure of the diamond of the Tao. Mm-hmm. And camouflage is a very important component to that. And as we say, we take everything from nature. So when we look at nature, animals, and octopus being one of them, chameleon, etc., they camouflage for 2 reasons. They camouflage to escape predators, but they also camouflage to get closer to prey. Right? So there's 2 reasons for that. Now, a military sniper does the same exact thing, right? They camouflage to get closer to their prey. Because if they didn't put all those twigs in their hats, helmets, and paint their faces, right? They wouldn't be able to crawl on their belly for 3 days to get close enough to take that shot. That's an active form of camouflage. Mm-hmm. Same thing. If you want to get close enough to your enemy to be able to discern their actions or to take that lethal shot, you have to pretend, you have to be camouflaged so the enemy doesn't spook. Mm-hmm. And that means a lot of things in a lot of different situations, but that's what it really, really is. If you want to get close to your prey, you have to camouflage.
Is part of that also being able to really understand how they're thinking?
Yes.
What's going on in their mind? Very often people don't understand each other at all, so.
The closer you are, people give everything away. If you know what to look for, everybody will tell you everything about themselves all the time. Okay? The easiest ones is the language they use, the words they use, and how they use them. But more nuanced are the eyes and the way they either look at you, don't look at you, when they look away when they say a certain word, right? And then there's something which is even more nuanced, the way their hands move, okay? The body posture and the hand motions, those are much more nuanced, but they give away everything of what the brain is doing.
Right.
And so you're able to catch a lie, you're able to have much more sense of where they are without telling them, right? Because you're in camouflage mode. You don't give yourself away, right? So you're able to pick up on things much more when you're close. When you're not, everything we just talked about becomes irrelevant.
Right.
On the
The
phone,
guessing game.
yeah, you can't see their eyes, you
Right.
can't see their hands, you can't see their posture,
Mm.
right? You can't see the micro expressions, the little flickers that go through that they don't even know they're doing.
Mm.
But if you're attentive enough, if you're listening with something much more than your ears and your eyes, if you're calm in your soul and you're grounded in yourself, you can then listen with your soul and you can really take all those micro things in, right? But not if you're pushing them away, not if you're pushing the situation away. Then all your energy is being used for that instead of being used for calmness and observation.
Yeah. So yeah, you just brought up calmness. And so one thing that comes to my mind is that, well, one thing I wanted to ask you is like, did you just learn this naturally? Did someone teach this to you? Were you always a person that just really, observed people?
Yes. Well, that's part of what I was born with.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to feel people.
Mm-hmm.
So as a child, I suffered for that because I didn't understand why I was feeling all these emotions or I was reacting to people. I would basically call out people in the lie and they would get very upset by that.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I was a savant or anything else. I was just very, very observant and quiet. So I could observe others. I can see how they talk. And I was always fascinated with the human condition. That's something that's fascinated me from a very early age till now, actually. I really, really do like humans. I get a huge kick out of humans and everything. And I think this world would be very, very boring without us in it and everything. So, I'm a big fan, but being a big fan also meant I was trying to always, from a very early age, figure humans out. Now, that said, before I knew Tao, or before I started understanding Tao, or before I started walking the path of Tao, the things that I was seeing, I would second guess myself on.
Right.
Because the filters of my upbringing would override my instincts.
Exactly.
So my thoughts would always override my heart. My heart was bigger than my brain, but I couldn't accept that because my father would drum into me through my whole childhood that those who are soft-hearted get destroyed by this world. So I was born with a very soft, gentle heart, which was very, very active, but it was still, it was soft, right? And my father would drum into my head that this was the wrong way of being. And he was very adamant about that. So I, of course, being a child, not knowing any better, I accepted that as the truth. And I would always try to have a very hard, solid heart, not listen to my emotions, listen to my thoughts, and I allowed my thoughts to override that. As I learned Tao, that reversed. And I was able to accept myself for who I was rather than who my father told me to be. And
you're talking about living in your nature.
right.
And the question that I wanted to ask about that is, how do you know that you're living in your nature? How do you know what your nature is?
When you
because
wake
it
up
sounds
with
like,
a smile.
what's that?
When you wake up with a smile, when life becomes easy and enjoyable.
You're living in your nature.
Yes, enjoying life does not mean that life is simple or you're not working hard. But enjoying life means you're in a state of relax because you know who you are and you can enjoy the flower instead of being worried about something else. You make space for that moment. You make space for enjoying this world, which is freaking unbelievable.
Right.
I mean, the things we can do in this world is just, I mean, people who spend all their lives trying to escape it, I mean, are you going to be able to taste an apple when you're dead? Right? Are you going to be able to hug your child? I mean, when I tell people that one of the most enjoyable things about this world to me is listening to my daughter breathe. There is no, I mean, outside of, certain people with certain orgasms, there's no better sound in the world than my daughter's giggles, her breathing, right? Her crunching or something. That is just phenomenal. And yet we miss all those precious moments worrying about how we're going to pay our bills, worrying about what we're going to do at work tomorrow, worrying about, that girl or boy we saw on the subway or whatever it was, because that chance is always gone forever and stuff like that. So we're always stuck in could have, would have, should have, instead of being in the present moment and missing all those incredible things that life gives you as presents. And by the way, they're all free.
Yes.
Smelling a rose or whatever flower you like to smell, right? Whatever bee you were in your last life, embrace that, watching the sunset, embracing a tree. Oh my God, trees are amazing. If you ever want to go feel something amazing, give a tree a hug. It's just incredible, right? When it snows or when there's sunshine or whatever it is. I mean, or, in the summer when it rains and it's warm, and to go just barefoot, walking in the rain as it's going. I mean, come on, right? None of those things are available to you when you're a spirit floating around in whatever heaven or hell you're imagining yourself going next. So that's where we basically destroy our chances of enjoying this life. But if you can't,
because heaven can be here. That's what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're enjoying this life, you're actually being who you are. You're being in a state you need to be in. It doesn't mean that life is going to be without work. It doesn't mean there's going to be no crisis. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be worried about things. But in the end of the day, you're going to be still insanely grateful to wake up in your amazing bed, and I got a wonderful wife who makes this amazing feather bed and everything. And I've gotten used to sleeping on that and down pillows and everything. And God damn it, I love waking up, right?
Yeah.
I love waking up on those pillows and everything, and the way she takes care of me, and to have her every day with me is just the most amazing thing, right? So those are the things you want to focus on.
Yeah.
Everything else, I mean, it becomes so silly compared to those things.
Yeah. Well, that's what you were talking about in that first chapter is not being alone. And I remember one of the wonderful things that you say about your wife is how she stuck by you.
I was very fortunate.
In very, very difficult times when you were going to court and people were against you and you say, hold on to those people at all costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that will be the difference between you making through it and you not making through it.
Yeah. You talk about conserving your energy and so what is the difference between, like, you talk about calm, you talk about conserving energy. What is the difference between conserving your energy and procrastinating, like conserving it and then just like not doing it?
You're conserving your energy for the moment that you have to use it all to explode into action. So you have to understand, is this action right for me or wrong for me? And if you've done your job right, you will have enough to be able to instantly explode into the action, take advantage of that opportunity, whatever it is. I don't mean you actually start jumping up and down. I mean, you take the right steps. But until you understand that this is the right path for me or this is the right action, you should actually hold back and not spend your energy, not, being in a state of nervousness, anxiety, worrying about the future, not sleeping, not taking care of yourself physically, not taking care of yourself mentally, not taking care of yourself spiritually, right? Arguing with your spouse, worrying what the neighbors are thinking of you, blah, blah, blah. This goes on and on and on, that basically all those things destroy your energy. And
so
when
just
it comes
running around, exhausting yourself in all kinds of different ways.
There you go.
Yeah. Because the more sort of nervous you are about everything is the more you want to just try and fix everything as quickly as you can, or
the more you'll do more actions rather than less.
Right.
You want to put your energy into the less but important actions rather than a little bit of energy into a lot of little different actions that lead to nowhere.
So how do you stay calm when a catastrophe happens in your life, or you feel it's catastrophic moment in your life? What do you do? How do
Go
you
for a
stay
walk.
calm?
Go for a walk until I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So until I can't even think anymore and remember why I was in this place anyway. And sometimes that could take 2 hours. Surround yourself with people that can help in you understanding the right perspective, that can help you talk through some of these things without judging you. And that's the most important thing about this team is they should never judge you. You should be able to say anything, no matter how ridiculous it is, because sometimes you just have to express your fears and worries. You have no choice about that. You're freaking human. Give yourself a break.
Right.
You're going to feel all these things no matter what, right? Expressing yourself to people who you trust and understanding you will have no repercussions, just to get it out of your system, just to get it out of yourself. Taking a walk with someone you can have a conversation with. Walking and talking is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. Obviously, you need the right companion for that.
Yeah. And you did that a lot with your wife while you were going through this.
That's all we did. That's all we did together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Needless to say, I did much more than 10,000 steps a day.
Yeah. So, you talk about self-care. So what are other ways that, how does self-care and the lack of self-care affect your energy? You've talked about it a little bit, but what other ways can you care for your body, care for your mind?
The things you eat, right? Have to be very careful with alcohol. Alcohol, while it has its uses, you don't have to stop drinking altogether, because sometimes there's no other way of calming down the nervous system than by whiskey. That's fine. That's fine. Doing too much of it then forces the body to spend enormous amount of energy recovering from that. So instead of you taking care of yourself, you overdid it, and now you actually have to spend much more energy recovering from that. Okay, so there's uses for everything. Don't throw anything out just because blah blah blah. There's a time and place for everything.
Right.
Acupuncture is a fantastic way of self-maintenance, because it opens your channels, your energetic channels up naturally and gently, well, depending on the acupuncturist and the size of the needles. But
the size of the needle, yes, I know.
For the most part, let's say you find the right one. Herbs, depending on, again, I'm not a huge fan of supplements. Supplements take too much energy to process, and people tend to overload on them, and it takes the body too much energy to flush them out and to process them, and the amount you get is very little for the amount that you have to expand on them. And herbs are the same way, so you have to be very careful with how much you intake.
Yeah.
Stimulants like coffee and tea, you have to be careful because you don't want to be constantly revving your system. Again, expending energy for nothing. If they put you in a state of, to use a little bit to get something done, which needs to be done, and there's no thing about it, great. But then take your foot off the gas, right? Relax. Don't chase coffee with more coffee. Take a nap, take a walk. Just be very cognizant of the return, what I like to call ROI, return on investment. In other words, for the energy that you're taking in, how much are you spending, and are you spending it in the right places? Start looking at your energy output as a spreadsheet rather than just haphazardly, I'm limitless, I'm this limitless immortal, and I can throw energy out everywhere. No, you cannot. You will fuck it up. Anyways.
Right. So then I want to talk about, in the next chapter, you talk about let go of what other people think.
Mhm.
And that is not an easy thing to do because
No,
we're people pleasers just as human beings, and we don't want to be
not.
alone, and we want validation. So how do you do that? How do you keep from getting lost in that trap? And what does that do to your energy too when you start to care too much what other people think?
Stay away from social media. Stay away from any place that you can read anything about yourself. Radio, newspapers, internet, social media. Don't go on places where there's a possibility of you seeing those things, right? Because everybody else is going to have their own opinions, right? There's, opinions unlike assholes, right? Everybody's got one. So everybody's going to have an opinion on you. Fuck them all. Who cares? The most important opinion is not only yourself, but the ones closest to you. That's it. Everybody else is irrelevant.
Yeah.
That said, this is what I talk about when I mean don't be alone and build a team. You want to build a team of people who aren't going to participate in that, who aren't, and if they are, who aren't going to share that with you. In other words, they're not going to come home one day and say, hey, guess what I saw in the newspaper, or guess what I saw, and everything. They're not going to put you in that position. Because there's nothing that you need from the exterior that's going to help you on your path. All it's going to do is you divert your attention and your energy.
Yeah. Well, also, you would be comparing your success with someone else's.
Exactly. Exactly. And you
Like,
have your own path and your own definition of
yeah.
what life is going to be like beyond this. And it's only yours.
Um, so you also talk about, I love how you put this one, to be humble because it increases your options. I love that. I love
God,
that.
that's
Say a little bit
great.
about that.
Wow, I haven't read that in a while. Fuck, that's great.
You're brilliant. You were brilliant.
Wow. Holy shit. What was I smoking when I thought that up? Uh, wow, that's wonderful to hear. Um, what do I mean by that? So, humility. Let's talk about humility. What is the opposite of humility? It's arrogance, right? And what does that mean? Let's talk about, see, in Taoism, we have this principle called the principle of reversion, that everything has an opposite, everything has a reverse. And a lot of times, it's much easier to understand what you're looking at when you look at the reverse rather than the phenomenon itself. So humility is a tough freaking thing to understand. And it's been so used up by all these monks praying in all these faraway monasteries and everything, and being poor, that means humble. No, that's not what it means. It means you're just freaking poor. But let's discuss the opposite of humility: arrogance. So what kind of things does arrogance bring up? Arrogance brings up closed-mindedness, my way or the highway, right? That I'm always right. And what is that? That means that you're a closed system and you don't take input from anybody else. And you think that your opinion is the only one that matters. And therefore, you never bother and look left or right, or take in those inputs. Like we started talking about, take those little inputs that are going to give you a different perspective on what's happening in front of you.
Right.
In other words, a state of arrogance has no perspective other than your rigid one that you think, is perfect, right? Mm-hmm. So the opposite of that is humility. Humility is being in a state of flexibility, an open system, like our earth or your body, right? You take in food, you poop it out, right? If you didn't poop it out, bad things would happen, right? So you need an open system where things are circulating. That is essentially being in a state of humility, having clarity of who you are and allowing everything to come in and out naturally rather than I'm closed off and this is it. And having people around you who call you on your shit, like my wife does, and I'm mostly grateful to her for that. So that really, really helps because yes, when you hear it from somebody else, you'll get pissed off, you'll get triggered, and then you'll realize they're freaking right and you should listen to them. Yeah. And then you'll listen to them and things go better. So that's kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah. Well, and that brings you back to what you said about being flexible in your book,
Right.
being flexible and adaptable. And when we look at nature, how is it that nature is flexible and adaptable, and how can we look at that and bring it into our own lives?
Because it doesn't have your, it doesn't care about your opinion. Nature doesn't give a shit. It fucks it up. So it wiped out the dinosaurs. Big fucking deal. I'll make the mammals. I mean, right? After it wipes out the mammals, it will do something else. So nature is really indifferent, right?
Uh-huh.
That's what it is. It has its own set of rules. It's playing its own game, and it's really indifferent. All it cares about is it keeps moving forward. Things keep rotating. There's an exchange. There's a constant exchange. There's constant motion. Nothing ever stands still in nature. It's either growing or dying. There's no such thing as standing still. Nothing in nature stands still. Even at absolute zero, I bet you something's going, fuck, it's cold. Right?
Right.
So we have to take example from that and do the same thing. We become indifferent to everything but what matters to us most in this moment.
Mm.
And therefore, we are able to make the right decisions and make the right actions rather than going all over the place and caring about the outcomes and worrying about this. And, somebody farted in Nepal and my life is over. I mean, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. And then you talk about knowing your opponent. And that kind of has to do with what we were talking about earlier. How do you get lost? How do you keep from getting lost in obsessing about your opponent?
It brings us back to you being grounded. Mm-hmm. You have to have a daily practice. That practice could be an hour. It could be 3 seconds. Okay? It could be you learning how to take that breath and remembering who you are, not getting lost in that person, not getting triggered by that person, and remembering, most importantly, why you're doing this. And this is something that people, when they get into crisis, this is something that's overlooked a lot. And I work with people a lot in crisis, and they forget why they're doing this. They're trying to survive and come out on top and thrive in a crisis, mm-hmm. so that they can have the life they want when the crisis is over. They can go back to what their path was before the crisis diverted them. So if you're getting a divorce, instead of hanging on to your house, what you really want is to live on a boat. Why are you arguing with your spouse over this damn house when what you should be doing is divorcing as quickly as possible so you can get to that boat that you want? Right? Who cares about the plates? Who cares about those little things? So he or she wanted 60% instead of you wanting to give him 65. That 5% is going to keep you from your boat for years. Why would you do that to yourself? Give him the damn 5%, get to your boat. Right? You might have an orgy going on in there, and who cares about the ex? I mean, I'm just, it's a hypothetical. I'm just saying. It's a possibility. It's one of possibilities. I mean, there's other possibilities, like, living with your children and not going to jail because you want to spend more time with your children. I mean, there's lots of really great things. I was just throwing one out. I thought, I don't like boats. That I figure that's one of the things that happens on boats. That's what I hear people talk about on boats, so.
It's just a rumor somewhere I've heard.
I keep hearing about people going in yachts and orgies and boats. I'm like, oh, whatever, okay.
So you have in next chapter, you say, keep your eyes on the ball. What does that mean?
That's what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right?
Knowing the
why am I trying to get on the other side of it? The goal is not to get on the other side as quickly as possible. In fact, the person that stays in crisis longest and is able to thrive in it wins. Because the other side will give up much faster than you, and your outcome will be positive. So the goal is not to get through it as quickly as possible.
Uh-huh.
The goal is to understand why you're doing this, why you're staying in this crisis, why you working in it, mm-hmm. and what is waiting for you on the other side. Not that it's going to exactly be what you envisioned. That never works out. But something that you can think of like a little tiny light somewhere. I'm like, okay, maybe that's where I'm headed and stuff. It never still works out the way you imagine, but something close to it will.
But that's where you outlast
Right.
the other person that.
You outlast the tendency of quitting, of giving up.
Mm,
You outlast your desire to quit.
mm,
Okay? The person who can do that the longest will come out on top in any crisis.
mm,
So it's not about how to get through crisis. That's not what this book is actually about.
mm.
This book is how to survive and thrive in a
In
crisis.
the crisis.
I actually want you to stay in it longer
Uh-huh.
so that you will win,
Yeah.
rather than winning because you got through it the fastest.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to win. The first one at the finish line is the loser
Yeah.
in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. When you just want the pain to go away as soon as quickly as possible.
You can go
Um,
away in it as well if you do the right things and if you are working on yourself.
You also talk about doing the best you can and then letting it go.
Yeah. So Lao Tzu has a great quote
Mhm.
somewhere in one of the poems. Stop when your work is done. So every time you're involved in a situation, every time there is an encounter, every time you're filling out paperwork, you're talking to lawyers, to accountants, wherever it is, you do your best in that moment because there's no yesterday. Your energy isn't being sucked to yesterday, could have, would have, should have. There's no tomorrow, right? It just doesn't exist. There's a light somewhere there, hopefully, but it doesn't exist. It's not real. It's one of those will-o-wisps, right? So there's only right now. And in this moment, you do your best you can, period. You put all your faculties, energy into getting this moment done the best that you can. The moment it's done, you no longer think about it. You no longer go back in your mind, I should have done this, I should have said this, I should have caught this. It's done. That moment is done, never to be repeated, never to be fixed, never to be replayed. If you keep replaying it, you're not done. You haven't finished when you work. You haven't stopped when your work is done. You're actually still in that same work. It's just as important when the crisis is over to stop thinking about the crisis. Your work is done. Stop.
And even for that one day, so you're conserving your energy so that you have more energy to outlast it. But
Exactly.
yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So do you have any tips on how to let go? Because that, again, it's not easy to let that go,
It's just work. It's just effort. It's just your practice. It's, again, people to talk to. It's the best thing that you can do. And I keep going back to this, and I know that it's not easy. And trust me, I really do know that it's not easy. I've lived it. I've taught it.
You
I
have.
understand.
You've lived it pretty thoroughly, I would say. In reading your book, it's pretty apparent. Yes.
You have to see things clearly. And by seeing things clearly, you have to keep focusing on the right perspectives. That will help you let go of things. And it will help you to have a practice that keeps you connected to the physical, that won't allow your thoughts to keep drifting somewhere else. And if you have to, when everything's over, go do some real hard labor. Swing a hammer for 12 hours a day.
Well, that's one thing that you talked about in your book when everything just fell apart and you started redoing your house. Like you started working on your house and that was just taking an action that maybe didn't make any sense in terms of everything else, but it was doing something.
But at the moment, I felt very useless.
Uh-huh.
I felt powerless. I felt like I couldn't affect anything. Mm-hmm. I felt like I couldn't get a win anywhere. And let me tell you, there's an enormous amount of power when you destroy your bathroom. It is just fascinating how much self-satisfaction you get from destroying that bathroom. From ripping up the floors to throwing out that fucking toilet you hate because it's too short or too tall or whatever it is. Sick of cleaning that piece of shit that never works right and keeps leaking and stuff like that. there's an enormous amount of satisfaction that goes in. And then you little by little, by doing such things, and it doesn't mean just, I mean, I chose that example, it's because it's the easiest, but there's other things you can do. But little tiny wins add up to you building your confidence back up.
Right.
Right? Add up to you becoming more grounded in yourself. Add up to you stopping the imagination and the wild flights of fancy and everything.
Right.
And those little wins add up. Those tiny little ones add up. Like I got the screw right. For the first time, I screwed the damn thing right instead of like this, or, I'm hammering a nail and it's bent like, you finally got it right. It's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Right? But that little nail going in perfectly into that, 2x4, will give you that little confidence. You're like, oh, I can do this. Well, I can do other things, right? So instead of trying to eat this elephant whole, instead of trying to win this whole thing, instead of trying to grasp this whole situation, instead of trying to understand, this is where human beings have a lot of problems of letting go of trying to understand everything. You can't grasp it all. It's too big, too many moving parts, too many variables, too much going on. You can't, no matter how smart you are, you can't grasp it all. But you can grasp pieces, right? You can take little bites out of the elephant.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, you finish that elephant off. You just won't notice it, right? But you can take little bites. So those little bites are more important than the big, steps or anything else like that. So look, in the end, it really, really, really helps to have someone by your side who's gone through it.
Yeah.
A guide, a mentor, a teacher, a coach, somebody who can share some experiences to show you that you're not alone. You're not the only asshole going through it. There's been thousands before you, if not millions. And instead of reinventing the wheel, just follow what works. And nature is what works. And everything we've talked about today all comes from nature. This whole book was written on nature. I mean, we call it Tao because that's the way, those guys 2,500 years ago named it and everything. But in the end, it's just nature and everything. It's the observation and replication of nature, which is what all our science is based on, which is everything else. And yet we keep thinking ourselves above nature. We replicated nature and now we're suddenly above it. I mean, how silly is that? Right? As a species, we're prone to arrogance. If you find it in yourself to fight against it a little bit, you will see massive, massive benefits. We're the only species that does this, and to this extent, right? This level of arrogance. No other species can afford to do that. They'll get eaten, they'll get trampled. Right? Well, our success has created arrogance. If you reverse that a little bit, if you resist that a little bit, you will see massive, massive benefits. And it really, really does help to have someone by your side who can help you out in that. And I wasn't alone in that. I had people by my side. I had people I counted on. Yes, number one was my wife, but there were others. There were quite a few others that I'm very, 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 very grateful for. And that's important. Don't do this by yourself. You can't. You won't last long. But everything in your body will scream at you to hide, run and hide, and the shame will overwhelm you. And all those things, the guilt and the shame, here's my message. They're not real. Guilt and shame are artificial emotions imposed on you from your childhood. No animal feels guilt or shame. Only human beings. And it's because it's not real. And if they're not real, that's the great news. If they're not real, they can be removed.
Wow.
So you don't have to be, you don't have to live in guilt. You don't have to live in shame. You choose to. It's always your choice. It's your responsibility and it's your choice to continue with that story. Is that easy? No.
No. Everything you're talking about isn't, but you're giving us a lot of ways to use our natural things that are in us that are naturally there, and that is getting help. The last two things you talk about is don't collapse when it's over, and find a way to direct your energy, and then stay on your path and stay strong, which talks about maintenance. So So when it's over, I mean, obviously when, if you're in a trial and that's over, I mean, that's just like huge. How do
Right.
you not collapse?
Or a divorce,
Or a divorce,
or
anything.
a health issue if you're
Yeah,
going through cancer. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. And you also talk that, depression is part of that and to accept some of that.
to accept a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah,
You're going to be worn out.
yeah,
I don't care how powerful you are. I don't care where you started. Any crisis wears you out, period.
yeah.
To some extent, some more than others, obviously. But you're going to be worn out. Your body, your mind, your soul need time to recharge. If you're going to expect all your systems to jump right back into action and take you into some sort of wonderful joyride, you're out of your mind.
Mm,
Okay? Everything needs to calm down. It needs to be depressed. It needs to be reset. And I don't care how long that takes. It could take 2 days, it could take 2 months, or it can even take years. That's irrelevant. You won the battle, you've made it through. You have to recover. Recovery takes time. If
mm.
you rush recovery, you will break something. It's the same thing as if I tell you take off the cast from a broken arm too early. You will re-break that arm again very, very quickly. There's a natural flow for everything, and that includes recovery. If you don't give yourself time to be in it, you will break something. You may not feel it right away, but you will break something deep inside of you that you may never be able to fix.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It reminds me of what you started off your book with, and that was that you died. You died, and then you came back to life. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So at the peak of my quote unquote physical, mental, and spiritual development, um, whatever spirits there are in this world decided that I really, really needed to learn humility. And you know what I love? This quote that I love the most, and I carried with me. There's a book called, and a lot of people have heard of it, Autobiography of a Yogi.
Mhm. Yep.
And in it, the quote that I love above, in fact, the rest of the book, it's good, but whatever. But the one quote that always stayed with me was Yogananda's teacher said to him, "You'll either learn humility or suffer life's humiliations."
Oh, wow. It's good.
And let me tell you, I have a very stubborn person when it comes to learning humility. So apparently life had to give me plenty of humiliations. Yeah. So, so as I said, my first real humbling, actually not my first, but the first I really noticed, I guess, came at the age of 36 when I had a massive heart attack. And through the grace of whatever there is out there, I survived it and, felt like a little bit shitty. And then I went to work and felt a little more shitty. And then I came home and I said, I think I should, call the emergency room. But that's how much of a strength I had.
Yeah.
I had a massive heart attack and I went to work and I worked all day. And only towards the evening, I started thinking like maybe there's something actually wrong. I mean, that's how much chi had going through me. And I wound up at the operating table and they give you some fantastic drugs. Oh my God. I mean, there's flowers growing out of the walls and everything. It's beautiful to see a sterile emergency room suddenly bloom into yellow flowers. And I wonder, maybe that's why my book is yellow.
That might be it.
Maybe that's why. So, so at a certain point, I found myself floating above myself. And I kind of knew somewhere, something inside of me knew this wasn't the effect of the drugs. This was something way more, way worse. And I heard a voice. And the thing is I practiced meditation long enough at that point to kind of knew that I wasn't in a meditative state. I wasn't in a drugged up state. I was in a different state. Mm-hmm. And there was a voice and it said, "Do you stay or do you go?" And
Was that a question
It was a question. It
okay?
was a
And
question. It
was
was
it you saying it to you, or was it something else saying it to
I
you?
don't know.
Mm.
I couldn't tell you. Just like, no, I couldn't tell you. All I know is it wasn't my voice. Let me be honest. At least it didn't sound like my voice. And do you stay or do you go? And I desperately, not desperately, but a huge part of me really wanted to answer go. Massive part of me, because I suffered this massive humiliation. I was a CEO of a major company. I was doing this amazing kung fu every day. I was doing this amazing things and everything, and this was a massive setback. A loss of trust with my body, loss of faith in what I was doing as far as practice and everything, and a real horrible sense of mortality, right? So the only thing that actually came in that moment of why not to leave, there was all these things of why to go. There was a huge bucket, massive bucket. But there was one little tiny thing of why not to go. And that was I would miss taking a walk with my wife. That was it. That was it. I would miss another breath and another step with my wife. And everything that came along with it, obviously. But that was the image that came to me. And that was the only reason I stayed. And it wasn't because I was earning money, and it wasn't because of the new iPhone, and it wasn't because of my house, and it wasn't because of whatever it is or anything.
Yeah.
It was because of that moment. And I knew in that moment that's where my priority should be. That was my perfect day. That was me being able, my last day on earth is taking a walk with my wife.
You knew your
That,
why.
that was exactly, that's, if that was my last day, that's how I would like to finish off my last day,
Yeah.
is to have a walk with my wife and my daughter.
Yeah.
So that moment taught me more than I could ever explain to you. It also helped me become who I am. I mean, I didn't know it at that time, but that was kind of the point where I started my journey towards being a teacher. That you have to go through death before you can truly teach it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it also, it occurs to me that on a certain level, you go through death, so you really know why you want to live.
Absolutely. Which is
And
which is how you can teach it.
yeah, and how you can teach how to live. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Yeah, how
Yes.
to teach how to live.
How to
Yeah.
find that spark to want to live, how to enjoy it, how
Yeah.
to enjoy life. I
Yeah.
mean, that all comes from death. Because if there's no death, nobody would ever enjoy life.
Mm.
Everybody would take it for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you love most about being a Taoist?
Our conversations, the people, the people that I get to meet along my path, the students, the friends, the encounters. It's just awesome. It's just the people I met when I was a CEO. Okay, you know, having lunch in Capitol Grill. Okay, but the people I met when I had my temple, the people I meet now in my path and everything, like yourself and everything, they make all the difference. They make all the difference in the world, and makes it so much more fun and so much more enjoyable. And most important, I guess, beyond everything else, what I like about it is I get to be myself every day. This is what
Mm.
I didn't know this when I started, but this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. This takes no energy for me to do. This is effortless for me.
Mm.
I don't, I don't prepare. I didn't prepare for an interview. I just said, let's see how it goes and stuff like that. And then we'll go somewhere, maybe fun, maybe not, but we'll be what it will be, right?
Well,
No,
it sounds like you're living in your true nature, and you get to do that in what you're doing. So now we talked about, you have your fingers in a lot of different pots. So are you mostly consulting people now, or how are you?
I'm doing what I love to do. I teach, and it doesn't matter what form it takes, whether it's helping somebody in business, an entrepreneur or a CEO, I'm a big fan of CEOs because I've been there and I understand what kind of lonely profession that is.
Mm-hmm.
And you walk into that boardroom, you're alone. That you're alone in that battle,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's a battle. The moment you step into that room, that's a battle, and you're alone. In fact, if you got allies, maybe, but most of them are trying to knock you down anyway. So you're alone. Um, you know, CEOs, executives, and then everybody from every walk of life you can imagine. I get to meet a lot of great people, and I do two things. As I said, I don't directly teach Tao. When somebody doesn't really need that, because there's no need for everybody to know exactly what Tao is or the principles. They just need to understand that there's a way to get to the answer.
Yeah.
Right. So I help them create a thinking pattern that gives them the right answer, the right perspective. Those are the people I would call clients. And the people I would call students are those who want to learn how to fish, who want to understand why those 9 principles are important, why you can't take one away, and everything, why Taoism is a system and not a just a collection of different little poems. It's actually one big system, and it needs to be as a system or it will fall apart. So that's what I do. And if the right opportunity comes along, I may jump into business again. I may not. I mean, I don't make any of those plans.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we jumped into a podcast. That wasn't planned.
Yes. So we were talking about nature. We're talking about animals. If you were an animal in this life.
Is this one of your lightning questions?
Yes, it is.
Is this we're in the lightning round now? All right, here we go. The lightning round.
You're ready for the lightning round. Okay.
Basically, here's the deal, guys. Whoever's in the audience, I made it through, right? I made it through the whole game. Now it's the lightning round. All right, let's go.
Okay, so if you were an animal, what animal would you be?
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
Anyways,
your favorite situation.
Oh, I am partial to the bear.
Like that. Your worst situation, what animal would you be?
Well, again, it depends on the situation. I suppose a mouse or an octopus. I don't know, something I can get into small holes and get out quickly.
An octopus gets
Oh yeah, they can squeeze themselves through anything.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
That. I did
Octopuses
not know that.
Are awesome. Octopi, whatever. They're awesome.
What's your favorite food?
Whatever my wife makes.
She's a good cook.
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah, you're lucky.
I'm very, very lucky.
When you were a boy in Ukraine, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I had no clue. I had no clue until I was 40 years old. I still have no clue. I don't even know. I don't know if I've grown up yet. I don't know if I can answer that question truthfully. But let me put it to you this way. Between the ages of 0 and 20, I had no clue.
Wow, you did a lot. You did a lot.
Huh?
If you were a color, what color would you be?
Well, I'm going to choose the one that Lao said didn't exist till 2,000 years ago. Blue.
Blue. Okay. That's a theory. So you'll be blue, something that didn't exist 2,000 years ago. If you were a song.
It was in yellow.
Or yellow. Yes, we have yellow too. If you were a song, what song would you be?
Oh, there's a song by an American who sang French song, Joe Dassin, called Essai tu n'existes pas, or something like that. I'm mangling the French, but if you didn't exist, how could I exist, or something like that. It's a really beautiful song.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. That's very cool. You're very relationship oriented. I really love that. So why do you think your wife said yes to marrying you?
What choice did she have? No. I think actually that's partially true. I think she recognized, hopefully, that we had complementary insanities. And I think that's what it was about us. I think, we love to walk and talk, and our insanity is matched. And like one of our friends said when we get together, she goes, "You two look like you had a lot to talk about." And we still go and walk and talk
That's great.
20 years later. So
That's awesome. That's so great. So the other one is, what do you think is the most important thing in a relationship? Okay. The second most important thing in a relationship.
trust. Trust.
Was it trust? Okay. So, I know I might have asked you this question once before, but you might have a different answer today. If you could live one day over in your life, what would that day be?
The birth of my daughter.
Mm. And this is the last one. What is one thing you would love to have accomplished before you die permanently on this planet?
I do that every day. I don't have any of those.
Mm.
Every day that I live is my last day.
Mm.
There is no tomorrow for me.
Mm-hmm.
And since there is no tomorrow, I get done as much as I want to get done today. And I do my best, and I stop when my work is done.
And you let it go.
And there is no tomorrow, so I worry about it.
Yeah. Very powerful. This has been so much fun, Arthur. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I just
for
want
those who don't know Cindy's book, it's freaking amazing, and you should check it out. It's right in the back over there. Cindy, point to it.
Yes.
Playing you.
Playing you. Yes.
Well,
maybe sometime we'll talk about that. But today has been amazing to speak to you, and I just want to let people know that this book has actually got me through some hard times right away. Every single chapter, every page has something in it. It's very practical. And if you've learned anything today with Arthur, you see how he lives in a very practical way, in a very realistic way, and a very honest way. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. And if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Well, they could find the book on Amazon, or they can, my email is just the best way. It's arthur@californiatao.org.
Okay.
So it's really, really simple.
Okay, great. Yes, yeah, you mentioned that this was on Amazon, so you can get this on Amazon.
The audio version is coming out, hopefully.
And what version?
The audio version.
Oh, the audio version is good. Are you going to record it? You're gonna have someone else record it. I would love to hear your voice recorded.
I'm immigrant. I come from a different country.
No good. Well, I just want to ask people to do another thing, and that is just to like this video or share it with anybody that you think could use it. Anybody who's in a crisis, and yeah, please like it. So
and subscribe
and subscribe and like. All right. Well, until next time.
If you want to see more of us,
we have another podcast, which is an even more irreverent one than today.
It's called Two Monks, One Cave. Go check it out.
And we talk about Taoism a lot in that one. So we'll list that as well. Anyway, Arthur, we do need to let our audience go rest and thank you so much. Peace out. Bye-bye.